Okay, I think recording has started. So, hi, I'm Lukasz. Welcome to AsyncAPI public meeting. Please be advised that this call is being recorded and it's going to show up on YouTube. So just take it into consideration if you have, I mean, not problems, but I mean, you don't like it. But we have to do it because we want to be transparent with the community. So that's if it comes to the intro. The agenda today, it's pretty small. But before we jump into the agenda items, usual option for, I think that actually everyone on the call have been here already. But if anyone would like to now jump in and introduce yourself to the community. Oh, wait, I have to admit another person. Hi, Carlos. So going back to what I was saying, so if anyone would like to introduce yourself while you're here on the call, that's the best time to do it. You don't have to do it. It's just that you have an option to like unmute now and introduce yourself. So anyone would like to say something? Don't be shy. We're pretty friendly here. At least I think so. Okay, that's just fine. So the agenda items is like the most important, and maybe that's why so many people joined, is the 2.1 release. But before we start the discussion, because I can't predict if it's going to be long discussion or not, maybe somebody has some questions that you'd like to ask before we jump into regular agenda items, because you can't stay with us for the entire meeting, but you would like to have some get some help from the community. So anyone would like to mention the topic you have before we jump into the discussion about the release? 3, 2, 1. Okay, so the release. Let me share first of all a link with you. I just pasted in the chat. So the link takes us to an issue where we had a discussion about the specification release cadence. That was the last issue, the last challenge we had to solve before before we could even start planning the release of the new version of the spec. So we are already in Linux Foundation. We already have open governance model. We already have release cadence defined. So it's for now, based on the discussion we had, it looks like we're gonna release new version of the spec every 3 months. And it's always going to be upfront communicated that like, okay, we release in April, and then 3 months after April is July. So upfront we're going to know that we release on July. We will have a feature branch for that, and all the changes will be happening there in this feature branch before the release. Another important thing before we jump into the main discussion is that we also have a new contribution guide for the spec, which is inspired by GitHub, by GraphQL, and in short, because you need to actually read the contribution guide to fully understand, but in short, it works in the way that when you suggest a new change in the spec, and it goes through all stages, and we say, okay, this proposal makes sense, we should have it in the spec, then you are required also to open a pull request to a repository where we have a JSON schema for the specification, because JSON schema is not a specification. It's just a tool for us to validate AsyncAPI documents. And you also will have to open a PR to JavaScript parser that adds support for this new feature in the spec. Because at AsyncAPI, we believe, I'm not sure if I can say about believing, but our approach here is that when we release new version of the specification, the minimum basic should be available in tooling, so at least the parser that users can use from day one with the new version of the spec. So that's briefly how it looks like from the contribution point of view. Now, the main topic is to discuss what are your opinions about the date of the release. So we don't specify exact date. I mean a day, but just a month. And there are two proposals so far, and we're super interested with your opinions here. So one is Fran suggested in the issue that we could do it June already. June, and but there's also a valid comment from Lorna about the making the release cadence friendly for those who have work in companies when there are usually important things happening at the end of Q1, Q2, Q3, Q4. So she suggested that we should maybe avoid the last month of the quarter, but maybe do it in the middle. So that's why looking at the proposal, it would be either May or June. And now, after this lengthy introduction, any thoughts about the month of the release, and keeping in mind that we want to regularly release every 3 months?
What's the real concern behind reducing that range of time to be like, I don't know, once a month? Why not doing release more often?
So the thing is it's we never did it in such a way that we're going to do it this time. That would be my first statement here. The other one is, at the end, it involves a lot of changes. It's not just a small change in the spec. It's also the change in the JSON schema, and you need to add feature to the parser. So that has to be coordinated, at least first few releases, until we learn. Oh, let me admit Fran. So at least few first releases, we need to learn how we can automate things, how we can do it smoothly. So that would be my answer here to the motivation behind the 3 months cadence. The initial idea from Fran, I remember, was 6 months. Lorna suggested 3 months. For me, I think it's fine. I actually wanted to do what you, Sergio, just said, why not regularly release? And I tried to do a contra proposal for that, but I wasn't able to imagine how that would work continuously. Because with feature branches, you can do those release candidate releases separately from the master. So technically, I think it's just much more complicated. That's why I would not do it more often but that's my personal opinion here.
I totally support, Zoltan speaking, if you hear me, totally support that if you start trying to do this doing too frequently is challenging first. So I think it's the 3 months is a good balance. In connection to your question about May or June or what, I think it's more important not over-engineer for you guys. So just keep it simple at start. I mean, you can always adjust. And I think it's more important to ask how a spec life cycle could fit into that. It's not more about the people's engagement, but how, for example, a new spec version, if you want to discuss that, could affect, for example, this kind of life cycle. But I don't think it's a big deal to just choose what fits the best and just start doing it. So that would be my input. Don't over-engineer.
Yeah. The good stuff about May is that then it's August and then it's November. Otherwise, if we do June, then we end up also with releasing on December, where people in December they are, I mean, in different mood than work. I mean, at least me.
Actually, I'm not sure it's good that we release in August, because to be honest, I'll probably be on the beach or in the mountain somewhere, like relaxing.
Precisely.
So yeah, I think it's good that it's actually good that it's September, because we're back to work. Most of the people are back to work, at least at some point of September. August, I'm not sure. It's top season, vacation season. So yeah. But the cool thing is that, as Lorna said, is that if we choose May, for instance, it will be in the middle of the quarter, which will be better to avoid, will be best to avoid this end of quarter noise that you get from your company and from other things you might follow, right? So yeah, that's good. Maybe, I don't know, maybe we don't have to do it every 3 months. Maybe we can be a little bit flexible here and do it in May, but then September, just to skip vacation season, summer season in the north hemisphere. So yeah, but then the problem is that, yeah, December, and then you have December holidays. So yeah, same thing. So maybe
I think it's more like a question what we're discussing right now with yourself is evaluating the regularity, I mean the fixed regularity, or you are interested on releasing more frequently, meaning that you can say to the community or the outer world that, okay, we have definitely 4 releases in this year or next year. We commit to that. And in average, it happens 3 months, but because of all this consideration, you're not fixing it. So you say that, okay, it's average 3 months you're releasing something, and then it could be, so it's not like you have to decide on a fixed frequency. I mean, because the release is not depending on a machine, it's depending on you or the community. I mean, I think it's totally acceptable if, for example, nobody is there in August to accept the release. I mean, so how you release that? I mean, I think the most important in this also, like, don't release on Friday, because then you sit there and fix bugs on the weekend. So, and then we come back to the other question, that the frequency of that, if it goes well and you want to more frequent, so you will change that very fast to a more frequent release, and then the relevance of this thing is more indifferent, because if you have a monthly release, for example, or average monthly release, so it doesn't matter if it's quarter or not, or holiday or not, because you have roughly a monthly release. But of course, it's just about question of maturity or will also.
I've got a quick question about what the versions would actually be that get released. So if you only have a trivial change to the spec, would you release a patch version? If you only have a non-breaking change, would you release a minor version? If you have a breaking change, would you automatically release a major version of the spec at each release sort of window?
Yeah, I think this is the intent here, right? So
Except patches, right? Patches would be regularly.
Yeah, actually, patches will not wait. Patches are immediate, right? Yeah. Minors and majors are the ones that wait to the release month, if you want. Let's call it like this. So yeah, because patches usually are just typos and things like this. I mean, we don't have to wait for this, right? This can be automated. This can even be automated with semantic versioning and this semantic commit. I always forget the name of this.
Conventional commit.
Conventional commits. Yeah. So yeah, that would be great. And then yeah, we might end up. I mean, we'll try to do our best to group major or breaking changes, right? So so we don't end up releasing every 3 months a major version, right? So instead, what we do is like, okay, so this is a breaking change. We already have another 3 ones, so let's group them together and put it into a specific release, even if it takes longer to release, but at least you release all of them together, right? But yeah, and some people are concerned that we might be releasing very often as a spec, and that we'll end up, if we follow this convention, it's easy that next year we might be talking about AsyncAPI 5. Can be because if you keep releasing things like this and you don't expect the breaking change, but then it appears, and you wait maybe 6 months and then it happens again, you easily end up in 5 or 6 next year, right? So which it's not that bad if you think about it, but the thing is that the problem is that we're or not the problem, I mean, but the thing is that the issue with this, or the fear with this, is that at least myself and some people as well are used to the OpenAPI release cycle. And but the different thing here is that OpenAPI doesn't offer the tooling, so it has to wait for adoption on the community, right, on the tooling to catch up, right? So that puts a lot of pressure on releasing a new version of OpenAPI, because then or releasing very very often with breaking changes, because yeah, it's like you have to wait for something you don't really control. But one of the things that we make it mandatory on the release cycle on the spec is that you should apply the changes to the, at least for now, the JavaScript parser and JSON schema definition of the spec. So that makes things easier to release a new version, because then some things will be just like, for instance, Dale Lane has been working on the Kafka SASL, SASL authentication for Kafka and all this stuff. And it really doesn't mean much for the spec, or for the tooling, sorry. For the parser, it means nothing, just updating the JSON schema definition and pointing to the new JSON schema. So then it's a matter of maybe the documentation renderer or the code generators to actually use this value and do something with it. Okay, so the final value might be delayed, but the thing is that we're trying here to decouple the release cycle of the spec with the tooling, right? Even though we might be able to keep up with the release cycle of the spec on the tooling side, but if it's not the case, it's also not a problem, because at some point we'll get there, right? But the thing is that we don't have to make people wait for something just because we didn't manage to do it on this specific point in time for this specific feature, right? So we can keep evolving, and of course, we'll make it. We'll make our best effort to have the tooling support the latest and greatest AsyncAPI spec, of course, but it doesn't have to be immediately, right? or at least not fully supported. Like can be fully supported on the parser. It has to be fully supported on the parser, but then I don't know, documentation generator, code generator might not make use of this new feature. But because the parser is working with it, the only thing you have to do on your code generator, on your documentation generator, is to update the parser. That's the only thing you have to do. You upgrade it, and that will work. Whenever you have time, you implement it on your final product if you want. But yeah, at least the part that is core, which is the parser and the spec, can evolve at the same time, right? Like pretty much like GraphQL, right? Then if Apollo, which is the final product, if Apollo doesn't support specific feature that is introduced in the latest version of GraphQL, that shouldn't stop GraphQL to release a new version, right? It's a problem of Apollo that whenever they have time and whenever they decide it's good for their business, they will support it. But the parser is there, the spec is there, everything is there, right? And it's already useful if you want to build something. So yeah. That's why we're Sergio and Jonas. They're putting a lot of emphasis on the intent-driven API, right? For the parser. So to minimize these breaking changes as much as possible, even if the spec has breaking changes, right? So yeah.
And just to add to it, the plan is that we will always have this kind of release candidate branch for the spec, for the JSON schema, and for the parser. And I mean, we didn't do the release yet, but technically it's possible that whenever we have new change that goes into this release candidate branch, we can release it as a release candidate, and we can automate it. So it's also by default, users will get JSON schema and the parser. But if the change is done at the beginning of the release cycle, and we have enough time to add support for new feature in other tools, we're gonna do it. And then at once we're gonna release everything. So we're pretty backed here by the tooling, I would say.
Yeah, exactly. We have the stages, right? We have the different stages on the spec. So as soon as you have something that is stage 2, which is draft, it's more or less mature enough already. So tooling can already start implementing support for this feature more or less confidently. Like it's not going to change a lot for sure. It's probably going to change, but yeah, it might involve you changing some stuff here and there, but implementation will be more or less the same. So the thing is that you can start implementing this functionality. I mean, you can start as soon as someone opens a proposal on stage 0, right? So you can start even at that time, but it's safe to say that on draft, on the draft stage, you can already start implementing things on tooling, and you can even release your tooling with this support under a flag or something, like you want to support the latest draft number X. I mean, this is not new. We all use tooling like this, like especially the ones based on specs. But for instance, I don't know, examples of this are Chrome. Chrome has, or Firefox has these flags that you can turn on or off, depending if you want to try a new feature or not, right? JavaScript, for instance, the language itself, they follow the same pattern. So you might want to use a new operator that appeared. Cool, you can use it, but you have to run node with a specific flag. Okay, you know what you're doing. If you're doing it, you know that it can change at any time. So it's up to you. But people can already use it, offer it, and use it. So,
Fran, a question.
Yeah.
It seems to me that we are, first of all, as I understand, you're binding the parser to the spec version, and then we are blurring the two things a little bit together, that talking about the versioning and the applying the features or using the features of a software or a spec. Like when you look at, like you just mentioned, OpenAPI, yes, it's just free or something like that, or even HTTP. I mean, so when you talk about spec, yes, so kind of stability, that kind of stability is kind of part of this word. I'm not saying that it has to be. I'm just saying that this is how people experiencing the specs. And of course, there was, for example, we see also changes like the Java version, I guess, when they just jumped in, and I can't remember where we are in Java 16 or 17 or something right now after, because they changed the release lifecycle. But I think at least it works to communicate. So it's, even though if we say that this is a good thing and this is a kind of agility, but I think it's important, for example, for the spec adaptation. Like I'm thinking about corporates. For example, when they have committed, for example, Swagger, yes, the Swagger 2, and they still, I'm working with things that there are discussions that should be used free because we just committed to 2, or this kind of behavior of frozen versions, like framework versions or everything. So it's a spec is more like that. So I think if it will be necessary to somehow communicate how people can adapt to this kind of release cycle of the spec, if you understand what I'm trying to say, because it's bind to the parser. So it's, I'm not saying that it's bad. I'm not against it, not misunderstand me, but at least like you just started this clarification. So how you do, what kind of, for example, enterprise decisions you have to take, how you manage this in a corporate or enterprise environment. So for example, not scaring people, oh, Jesus Christ, it's too much versions we cannot follow because our governance model is like we making decisions every year, and how can we follow up, and what are the migration costs of all these versions and everything. Do you know what I'm trying to say?
Yeah.
So I think that's it's a communication thing, not a decision thing. I just want to mention.
So if I understood well, I think so. One thing that for sure we're not doing is tying the parser version to the spec version. We're not doing this, right? So the parsers will always support, let's say.
Okay.
So the parsers will always support. I don't know. Imagine next year parsers will be supporting AsyncAPI 2, 2.1, 3, 3.1, 3.2, 3.3, 4, 5, whatever version we have, right? Until a point where we decide that, of course, we're deprecating version 2, or we're deciding that we're not supporting version 2 anymore, or version 3 anymore, because it's been years already. You already had time to update, right? But it's not tied. So precisely because of this, Sergio and Jonas are working on this API for the parser, so you can keep your code as is, independently of the version of the spec that you're using, right? Unless you want to use a new feature, of course. But for the existing features, that from version 2 to version 5, all the common features that were already present in version 2, your code should not be changing. Unless you want to use something for version 5, then of course you have to change your code because you have to add new functionality, right? But that's the whole idea, is that just because we release a new version of the parser, it doesn't mean that the parser will not work with previous versions of AsyncAPI. That's not what we're doing.
Thanks.
Welcome.
Okay, so anyone anything to add to this, especially May versus June? We also don't have, also our approach is to not make decisions during the meetings. So we're gonna share the recording with the community in the issue, and still wait a few days until next week, because next week is May. I vote for June, but no suggestions here.
I will do another suggestion. I will put it on the on the issue, which is using fixed months. Like we have, for instance, May, we have September, we have January, and then I don't know, we have to choose maybe March, something like this, February or March. That's it. And we choose these months, and they're always these months. And we make sure that these months are not conflicting with any vacation period or anything, right? So we
Good
try
idea.
to. So it doesn't have to be every month exactly, like depending on the period, the time of the year. But it's always the same.
You said June, September?
You want it to be June? Okay. I mean,
No, what, it's June, I mean, May, September, and then what you said?
May. I mean, I was just thinking aloud, like May, September, then to avoid December because of holidays, we move it to January, right? And then we move it to March, maybe, which is something between January and May, right? More or less. I mean, it's actually the middle. So I don't know, something like this might work. Or we have these are 4 months, 4 release months a year. We can have maybe 3 and 3 release months a year. So we can play with them in a way that they are always not conflicting with holiday periods. Then it's just a matter of deciding which months, of course. But my point with this is not about specific months, but more about we don't have to be doing this every 3 months exactly, right? But we have to be clear which months are we going to release. Not now, but even the next year, and even in 2 years. Like this is not going to change. It's always the same. Then we can even promote this like it's a release month in AsyncAPI, right? So we can even make parties, online parties about it. You know, it's like it's release month or next release month, which is always the same. But it doesn't have to be a specific fixed period of time.
Sounds like a plan. So
I support the idea to pointing out months, even if it's 4 or 3 or whatever. But yeah, you're pointing out month and then that's it.
Mhm.
And you have to fight over May and June.
Well, it's up to. I mean, I understand the point of Lorna on the issue saying that it might be good to avoid end of quarters. But yeah,
in the end, it's if it's defined upfront, nobody's stopping people from contributing to the spec in the first 2 months of the quarter, right?
no, I think it's. I mean, don't want to talk for her, but I think it's more related to the noise. You know, the inherent noise in your daily life that you already have in emails and company communications and blah blah blah. Plus, AsyncAPI release, so it gets diluted. The message gets diluted into your mailbox, or
Okay.
you know, what that's. I mean, I don't know. I mean, in my now I understand what she's saying, but to be honest, when I was working as an engineer, I wasn't having this problem with the noise every quarter. Like for me, every month was the same. So just holidays, that's the only difference. So I wasn't caring about end of quarter or beginning of quarter. I think this is more for management and for management levels. They probably are more worried about it, but or they receive more noise.
I don't know how it.
Yeah.
I don't know how it is in the rest of the world, but at least here in Canada, companies can define when their quarters end, like when their year end is. And like, for example, Solace is April 30th. So April's a busy month for us. So, you know, I don't think it makes much difference. I mean, every company could be different, at least here.
But that's fiscal year, if I'm not mistaken, right? So this is not quarters. And
Yeah, no, but the quarters are derived from the fiscal year. So it's like you start with the year end date, and then every 3 months is a quarter in terms of our work, you know.
But it's still the same month, I think, because it's April.
Yeah, it's still 3 months.
This fiscal year starts in April 1st, so it's still the same month. Just
well, it's yeah, the fiscal year starts in May 1st, actually, for us.
May 1st.
April 30th is the year end. Yeah.
Oh, so that's weird.
So it's offset by, you know, a month or two. So
okay, so then this is different. Yeah, then the months are not the same. Yeah. Okay. Didn't know. I heard about.
In fact,
doing April 1st. April 1st. No, not May 1st.
Yeah, in fact, that there's actually people recommend not doing like year end like at December 31st because people are away for Christmas and stuff like that. So, you know, they actually recommend companies have odd year end dates, you know, that don't correspond with, you know, things like January 1st or whatever. So maybe it's different in Europe. Maybe everybody has the same year end date. I don't know.
No, I mean, in different companies I've been working on, it was always different. Like some companies were following the natural days of the month, like natural quarters from January to December. And some companies were starting on April 1st, which always sounded weird to me. But yeah, I only saw these two variations, never May 1st. So yeah, yet another reason to.
Yeah, I'm just suggesting maybe it's not an issue after all.
I think that's your point. Then it's like you cannot address everybody, because then you're ending up discussing every month or every day, and it's like what market you are addressing and stuff like that. I mean, what is comfortable for you guys in the community? I think that's more important. So are we comfortable to release on a date or like that or not? That's it.
For June. But only because it's a first time we're gonna do it, right? So we need to configure a few stuff and figure out things.
Yeah, no, that's true. I mean, for the first time, it's a little bit premature to choose May, but because it's next week, so. So yeah.
Basically, avoid pressure, right? I mean, that's why I left my previous job to forget about pressure.
Lukasz, didn't I tell you that? I had a call with your previous manager, and
you're going back.
And he told me that you're coming back. So yeah, and actually, yeah, I mean, I want to release a new version on December 31st, man, with with all the fireworks and with the real fireworks, which is actually January 1st, not December 31st.
Small comment. Fireworks are not good. At least in Poland, we run away from fireworks because they scare animals.
It will be the same here, but it's not.
So I'm not signing up for fireworks, but still 31st of December. It sounds interesting, but no, thank you. Okay, so to summarize, this week we should decide on May, June. I think we're all pretty supportive for approach that we know upfront, years ahead, when release happens. We just need to figure out what months. If it's 4 times a year, 3 times a year, if it's whatever. And also the first release, I don't think it has to be according to the schedule, because it's a first release. We're gonna experiment a lot, I think. Okay, another topic related to the release is the scope of the release. Of course, again, I don't think it's a place to discuss the scope of the release. More important to communicate with you that, I mean, if the release happens, May or June, that's the moment where you should probably push your topics to the release schedule, And I was thinking, like, if we need maybe some kind of open dedicated channel or Slack, or maybe create an issue where people could discuss the scope. So, for example, I mean, or you think we should go directly to people? Because for example, I know Walid, he had a very good proposal with adding the message ID to the spec. But I mean, Walid, as many community members, he's not able to follow us every day because he has a different job. So of course we can be proactive here, and I can ping Walid and ask him if he's available to push forward his idea, etc. But maybe, I mean, proactiveness is one thing, especially when we know people, but not every case is like that. So I was thinking, if you have some ideas how we should, where we should hold this discussion about the scope. Is it still general channel, you think? Or any channel as usual, nothing dedicated to the release? What's your thoughts?
You're looking for a channel or a communication where you would in detail discussing links, or
like a support channel. So first of all, discuss what should go into the release and who can be a champion for the topic to push it forward. But also, because it's a first time we do this release, first time we organize it in the way that it's discussed, I guess it would be nice to have a dedicated place where people know that they can go ask us questions and ask us for support, how to do this first contribution that is not just drop an issue, but actually from step one till the end, how to get your topic into the spec in this first release. So it's a support plus discussion, something like this.
I'm not big fan personally, and bad experience with deciding upfront when you separate a channel in a communication like Slack or Teams or something. Because what I realized that people has their opinion of what channel name should be, and then the discussion is about the channel name, for example. So, and that's very annoying. So if we talk about just the first one, I would say that general is pretty nice and to start with. And if the discussion grows to an extent that it's not manageable because you have to scroll back and so forth, you can still spawn out and say that, okay, this is the first release channel now because it's so volatile or something like that. About the proactivity, I think it's a good idea to send notifications or proactive, but it's also, remember, that also gives you an extra thing in your shoulder to do that. So I would say that somehow I would automate that instead of saying that, Lukasz, I have to remember that to ping XYZ about a topic or something, because then at one point you go crazy. I mean, so, but that's also maybe a middle term. At the first time, you know the main contributors already, and I think you just have to gather this team and on general as a start and start doing it. I mean, and then I think the other thing is capturing. Again, we just discussed this many times. If you are able to capture the practice already in a sort of a issue or something, so next time you don't have to discuss it because you captured the tips and tricks in the way. I mean, but that we have discussed that, and I think you have the practice already. This kind of practice, that capturing this kind of things in places. So I would do this way, but that's just me.
Yeah, in my case, I only think about this channel, and good idea about having it as a temporary, because I mostly will support, and it's gonna be probably me and Fran, but maybe others if they want to jump into this initial configuration, how to do it with conventional commits, etc. So it's gonna be a lot of discussion and we always avoid having discussion in private channels, and in general having like more discussion about like focus only on the release, it can just generate noise. I always try to avoid the noise on the general. That's why.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, that's fair. That's what I said. If you already know that it'll be noisy, you are expecting that. So yeah, and then just open up. But I think with the channels, I always thinking that it's like precisely what you just said. As you're thinking, I think it's good to point out it's temporary. So when it's done, the knowledge, that's very important, because what do you expect from a channel? Yes, there's two expectation: communicate, discuss things, or you expect that this is the source of knowledge. So you want that people find things there. And I think in this case, it's more like communication, and it's very important to keep it that. And capturing the knowledge is somewhere else. Yes, the practice. That's where the differentiation. And of course, if you already know that this will be noisy, I mean, you do a channel or you do some separated things, and that's it. It's yeah.
My only concern with this is that this channel will go unnoticed because nobody joins and people just don't know it's there. So my approach used to be that one. Like, as a developer, you want to categorize things properly, but then I realized, precisely because of you, Lukasz, that who suggested this, to be more reactive. So if it becomes noisy, then we react it and we create a new channel. When it becomes noisy, when we notice that it's already noisy, because we might think it's going to be noisy, and then in the end it's not. So, and then people might not notice there's a channel there, or they don't know what it is about and they just don't join because they don't know what it is about. So, like, for instance, we have this, there's a lot of misunderstandings with channels. Like, I mean, not a lot, but there's some of them, like open async API. Some people, there's a channel called Open Async API. Some people think that this is the channel where we are open, and they can, and it's open for them to ask questions there. And when it actually was created to discuss about the fact of mixing OpenAPI and AsyncAPI together as a single spec, it was an old idea that popped out in the beginning of the times of the channel of the Slack workspace. But people see Open Async API and it's like, so this is the open channel for me to ask. And this channel is there, and I mean, nobody's using it. And so yeah, there can be misunderstandings like this. Like, if you create a channel called what, release support or something, or release or what, some people might look at it and it's like, not for me, and it might be for them, but yeah, I don't know. So I don't know.
See, you just confirm my theory about discussing the name of the channel.
yeah, exactly. So it's like, I prefer to go the other way around now. I mean, before I used to be like this, but now I prefer the other way around, which is, let's be noisy, and whenever something is noisy, then we discuss what to do. Like, how do we categorize this? Maybe on the welcome channel and on the welcome message on Slack that we have configured, we can explain more there, but not sure how many people are reading this message, to be honest. I am this kind of person that never reads these messages. So yeah. So yeah, that's why I was like, I mean, everybody is on general. So if we want to, if we want people to be aware of it, let's use general. And if it becomes a problem, like with tooling, like with what happened with tooling, then we split. And like what happened with the integrations with GitHub releases and new issues and PRs that were initially linked to general or tooling, I can't remember, and then they were separated out because of the noise. So yeah, like, again, like reacting to what happens. We don't know. We might think we know in advance what's going to happen, but we might be wrong. And so yeah. So yeah.
Okay.
Again,
so
it's about premature assumptions. That's what we talk about. I mean, I think addressing what you just mentioned, no one knows about it. It again goes back to the practices about proactivity and how you use general. Yes. So for example, if you say so, it's like Lukasz, you just mentioned that you want to notify people. I mean, and then you can say that okay, there is a regular announcement, you just we're reiterating the message when it comes to release. Again, we're talking about the release, yes, or the first release, definitely. So maybe it's just periodic or temporary. So I mean, doesn't matter how you start. Again, just start and then just jump on it, and don't discuss the name of the channel.
Is the remainder of the agenda for the last 4 minutes, is it very full, or can I ask a question?
that's the best moment to ask a question.
Yes, so because I've just submitted a PR against the spec, and then I found out that this meeting is ongoing, so I thought that's a good occasion to pick it up and just mention it. So Lukasz pointed me at 3 issues this morning, and they reflect the issue that I've been running into, which is essentially that there is no link between channels and servers. Essentially, a channel has a name, and implicitly it's assumed that all the servers have that channel. And I've been writing an AsyncAPI doc for an application that needs to work with different servers. It reads, for instance, it receives messages from one server on a certain channel, and then it sends out messages to another server on another channel. So I need to link channels and servers. And as I said, there are 3 issues already on that. And I've submitted a PR against the spec that I think would address that. Just wanted to hear whether it's acknowledged that this gap exists, whether it's seen as a gap, or whether it's just nice to have. Question mark.
So, well, I just noticed it. I mean, you opened it like a few minutes ago, right?
Yes.
Okay, so
no, but the issues were old, no? The
oh
issues
yeah. No, the issue is like it's actually pretty old. I will say from version 1, it's there.
Yes.
But just want to add something here, which is for those here in the call and watching the recording, this is the way. This is the way. You want something to happen, just open a PR or an issue, or preferably a PR. And even if it's not final version, which is probably never a final version until it takes time, right? Just do it like Gerald did right now. Like this morning we were talking about it, and now we have a PR where we can discuss over the changes. So that's, I mean, thanks for that, man. That's perfect.
No worries.
That's
it's
perfect.
easy to write Markdown. That's not the problem.
Exactly. So I'm actually gonna label this as an RFC, just so we don't forget about it. We don't lose it. So yeah.
So what do you think about the relationship between servers and channels? Was the assumption always that all these servers would be for different environments and so would support all the channels in a document?
I think so, yeah. I think most of the times it has to do with environments. At least that's what I found out. Like development, staging, test, and production, usually. And then yeah, I don't think I ever heard of a different use case. I mean, there might be other use cases, but yeah.
There were people sometimes asking about this, exactly this situation that you have 2 different brokers, 2 different like technologies, MQTT or Kafka, and that one application communicates with 2 different brokers. So you want to basically have this linking. So few people asked, but like as emphasized what Fran said, but you're the first one that actually created PR and took time to
Exactly.
to take it forward. But there people talked about it. The challenge is, the thing is that, for example, in Generator at the moment, we have, let's say, native support for approach that you have server per environment. So there is a core feature in the Generator where you can use, and Generator will always pick the server that you specify in the CLI. You have a dedicated parameter where you can say, okay, I now do code generation for server A, or for
And that's
server
the
B.
key in the map.
Yeah.
I see.
And whenever I hear about this idea, I'm so biased by this environment approach and this feature of Generator that I can't imagine how will it work without it. Like when we have multiple servers supported by the same by single application on production, for example. So that's a thinking challenge, for example, for me, that I will have to go through looking at the proposal.
So in my scenario, I would have, let's say, an IBM MQ server in dev and in prod. And I would have an MQTT server in dev and in prod. And so your approach still works. It's just that the name of the server cannot be dev and prod. It must be IBM dev, IBM prod, and MQTT dev, MQTT prod. So 4 different servers, 4 different names, because they must be unique in this map, in the server's map. Yes, so that needs to be.
And answering or adding to your comment, Lukasz, I think one way to think about it without the usage of server on the Generator on the CLI, one way to think about it is that the code handles this based on the environment variable, for instance, right? Or a given environment variable. So like, I think like in Node.js, for instance, you have node_env, node_env, which in production is usually production. And if it's not set, it's assumed that it's development, right? And so the code could be checking this for you, right? Checking the node_env or the env environment variable. So you don't have to pass it on the CLI, right? But again, that's a strong assumption of how your code works. So
how the servers are named, really, no? That's the assumption.
Exactly. So that's why we thought in this initial idea of, no, you pass the server you want to generate the code for. But yeah, like in the case of Gerald, for instance, the code will be always the same. It's just depending on an environment variable, maybe it will point there or there, right? So yeah.
So I just pasted the link to the pull request from Gerald. So thanks, Gerald, for doing it. If anyone wants to jump in, then please. It's 3 minutes past 10, so yeah, to respect times of others, we're gonna finish. No worries, no worries. Thanks for joining. So to summarize, we will finish discussion about the release this week in the release cadence issue, and that's it. And I'm so tired that I don't know how to finish the call. So let's say thanks a lot for joining again with such a huge number. Again, we see each other in 2 weeks in the morning, 8 a.m. UTC. And I guess that in 2 weeks, we will already know when exactly the release happens. Arrivederci.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye.